Okay. Hello. Great to
Hey,
have you. Yeah. Um, Thank you so much, Dr. De Grey, for making out the time again to be here with us today. And due to network issues in Nigeria and some part of African countries, we are streamed live in um on our YouTube, and some persons are joining via YouTube. So they seem to be struggling with the internet. Okay, and again, a sincere apology for moving the program to 8 and then back to 7 again, because some person um we test run that 8 since yesterday or so, and it was a little bit okay, so I thought that I can just move it, but sincere apology, that was a very wrong move. Okay, so guys, welcome you all for today's class. And for me, if there is anything that you would need to know about aging and longevity, we are facing someone I consider as the father of modern day longevity science, and that we are working on Afro longevity. Although my initiative that I later started working with Brenda, this is something that I consider. And this is someone that I consider to be the reason why we're here. So he supported us and he gave us the first funding for the launch of Afro Longevity. And ever since, he also was the lead founder for the launch of International Longevity Summit Africa. He is our chief science advisor. In fact, whenever there is complexity, he's the one that I run to. So if he cannot do anything about the situation, so there is nothing I can do about it. And he's someone that must have sacrificed so much, his personal resources, and there is if I say 85% of the longevity organization or movement, public and private sector, he advised them directly or indirectly. And so that's why I say if you have any question to ask about longevity and the biology of aging, if you miss this class, you're on your own. I cannot help you. So I welcome Dr. Aubrey de Grey. He will tell us a little bit about his background so as to inspire the young longevists and enthusiasts in the room and the clinicians and the need for longevity education and practice in Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. De Grey, for making our time to be here. I yield.
well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, OC. Today I will give a presentation which I will share on my screen shortly. But I wanted to start by talking about Afro-longevity and about longevity in Africa in a more general introductory way. I will also make plenty of time for questions. I will try to speak for no more than about 40 minutes, so that there is time for everybody to enter into the conversation before I have to go. And I'm very grateful to OC for taking the time back to 7 p.m. African time, because I have to do something else an hour from now. Um, so why am I so enthusiastic about the longevity movement in Africa? Why have I done the things that I have done that OC just mentioned to support them and support Afro longevity and so on? Well, first of all, I have to say that one huge reason is the team. Ossie and Brenda are two of the most inspiring people I have ever had the privilege to work with. That is no exaggeration. And I've worked with a lot of inspiring people. These are people who are able to struggle incredibly hard and incredibly effectively against the most extraordinary challenges. I mean, since all of you are from Africa, you understand that there are a lot of challenges in Africa that would not really exist in the Western world where I spend my time. So I understand very much that you relate to what I'm saying. But these two people have been able to create and sustain an organization that hardly anybody understands the value of in Africa, for 4 or 5 years now, and they are making steady progress. So I really want to express my appreciation not only to them, but to you for being here today. The fact is, they asked you to sign up, but you did sign up. And I'm hoping that both I and the other lecturers who are giving these talks during this period of time are succeeding in educating you guys to understand what you can do to promote this field. So that's what I want to say about Osi and Brenda. I won't embarrass them anymore, but I will talk for a few minutes about the relevance of the longevity movement in Africa, because this is something that is easy to ignore. Most people in the West think about Africa as a region in which other health problems of early life, such as malaria or HIV, are much more important in some way than aging. And you can understand that because historically, the number of people who die from those things has been really, really high, and the number of people who become old enough to suffer from the health problems of late life has been relatively low. But let's be completely clear. You guys are catching up. You really are. It's been at least 10 years now since the World Health Organization published their annual report on life expectancy that showed that there isn't a single country in the world with an average lifespan less than 50. I think that in 2015, when the report that I'm talking about first came out, the country that had the smallest life expectancy was Sierra Leone, and it was 51 or 50.8 or something like that. Every other country was higher. Now, every country outside of Africa was at least 60. The lowest country outside of Africa was Afghanistan, if I remember rightly. But still, if you'd gone back even 10 or 20 years from there, then the numbers were far lower. So, and of course it's carried on since then. I actually didn't get time before this talk to look up the latest figures, but it's going up all the time. You guys are bringing the health problems of early life under control more and more and more every year. And that has this side effect that more and more Africans are getting to their 60s and 70s and 80s. And those are the people that I'm interested in helping. Those are the people that Osi and Brenda and Afrolongevity are interested in helping. So now, what's the role of Africa here? Is it simply to be the beneficiary of technology that is developed elsewhere? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that it is critical for both medical doctors and researchers, as well as, of course, the general public in Africa, to understand the role that you guys can play. And that comes in many forms. One form that is extremely important arises from genetic diversity and cultural diversity. I, remember that it wasn't very long ago that I discovered that pretty much everyone who has a good education in sub-Saharan Africa speaks at least 3 or 4 languages, often like 6 or 8 languages. You know, I speak 1 language. I mean, it's pathetic, right? And I'm very well educated. So, that's really important from a cultural perspective. The value that people with a broad cultural diversity bring to any field of research, and certainly to biomedical research, cannot be overstated. It's huge, and it's really missing in the West. The second thing I mentioned is genetic diversity. So, of course, there's still a lot of populations in sub-Saharan Africa, especially, that are very, very genetically distinct from the West. In the West, because of an enormous amount of traveling over the past century or more, there has been a lot of homogenization of genetic diversity. It's not complete, of course, and there are certain places like Iceland that are very genetically distinct, unusual, and homogeneous. But we need far more of that. We need far more data from other genetically distinct populations in order to use modern technology like artificial intelligence to the maximum benefit for humanity overall. So this is very, very, I'm talking so far about the whole of biomedical research, right? The whole of biomedical research is a partnership of humanity as a whole. And Africans should never regard themselves as, second-class partners in that. Africa offers just as much in different ways as any other part of the world does. So I really want to emphasize that. Now, I don't know much about the audience here. There are too many of you for me to ask you to introduce yourselves, but I see that there are various people with doctorates. I don't know what the distribution is between people with MDs versus people with PhDs, people who are at earlier stages in their educational journey, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume nothing. I'm going to give a talk that addresses a broad audience. For all I know, there are plenty of people here who have no biomedical background at all, and I do not want to leave you guys out. So I will bear that in mind in my remarks. The final thing I want to say before I bring up my slides is that a lot of the progress that has been made in the West with regard to postponing the health problems of late life has been going unnecessarily slowly because of simple mistakes of just false assumptions about how the body goes downhill when you were born a long time ago. And those are mistakes that we need people to learn from. And certainly the African research community and medical community, insofar as you move into the aging space, has the opportunity not to make the same mistakes. So I shall be referring to that a little bit. Right, so now I'm going to share my screen. Please give me a minute. Share, that's this one. Bang. All right, and I want to do that, and I want to do that. Could someone please confirm that you can see my slides and still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, we can.
I will take that as a yes to both questions. Marvelous. Okay, so here we go. So this is what I work on. I work on rejuvenation. So that is a word that has a bit of a history. 22 years ago, I was invited to become the editor-in-chief of a journal which was called the Journal of Anti-Aging Medicine. And I recognized that that title was unhelpful because the journal was a research journal. It wasn't a medical journal, and the wrong people were looking at it. So I said, we've got to change the title. And they said, you're right. And I said, what do you want to call it instead? And I said, I want to call it Rejuvenation Research. And the publishers were horrified. They said, no way. Rejuvenation is all about cosmetics. But I stuck to my guns and I forced them to accept my chosen title for the journal. And it took probably 10 years for me to win that argument. Fact is now, when you use the word rejuvenation in medical circles, especially in the biology of aging, people understand what it means. It means reducing biological age, making somebody biologically younger again, not only on the outside, but on the inside. That's the real, the proper definition of the word rejuvenation, and that's how I use it. So rejuvenation biotechnology is all about taking people who are already in middle age or older and making them biologically younger again. And if I have time towards the end, I will come back to explaining what longevity escape velocity is, but that's not going to be a main theme of what I want to say, so I won't talk about that yet. All right, so here we go. And, yep, good. So I'm going to start with this question. Now, I already spoke about the situation with infectious diseases in Africa, but let me broaden what I said and talk about infectious diseases everywhere. 200 years ago, even in the wealthiest countries in the world, like the UK, where I grew up, there were more people dying before the age of 1, far more, than the number of people who die before the age of 1 in Africa today. Far more. It was like 1/3. Like 30% of people would die before the age of 1. It's insane. And then we had a few smart people who came along. There was Edward Jenner in the UK. There was Louis Pasteur in France, people like that. And they figured out a little bit about what was really killing these kids. And they figured out that, hygiene is a really good idea. And they figured out a few really elementary types of medicine, like vaccines and antibiotics. And of course, carrier control. That means things like mosquito nets. And the number of lives that have been saved is absolutely monumental as a result. Now, of course, there are some diseases which were much trickier than that. HIV is a very important one, both in Africa and in the West, of course. And HIV is more or less under control now in the West, and it's increasingly under control in Africa. But of course, there's a way to go, and that's largely for financial reasons. But we're getting there. At a scientific level, the problem has been basically solved. But now, look at the situation in late life. Because hardly anybody is dying young anymore in the West, and as I've said, a very rapidly decreasing number of people are dying young in Africa, more and more people are getting old enough to get sick from being old. And we have to ask the question, what is the difference? Why has the same kind of medicine that has worked so well against infectious diseases been so ineffective against the health problems of late life? Now, this question should be at the center of everyone's mind in medical research, but it isn't. And I believe that the main reason that it isn't is this. Everybody knows that an awful lot of things go wrong with us late in life, and they happen at more or less the same time, and they interact with each other and so on. By the way, in case you were wondering, you're not supposed to be able to read this slide. The whole point, of course, is, just to emphasize how many things go wrong. And, it's kind of plausible that the reason why we have been so unsuccessful with modern medicine against the health problems of late life is because of this complexity. It's overwhelmed the medical profession. Now, if that were true, and it is partly true, if it were true, then, that would be wonderful. That would be really good news. because we've got AI now. We've got artificial intelligence coming, which is really, really, really good at hacking through complexity and, extracting insights. But unfortunately, this is not the main reason why we have been so unsuccessful. It is some of the reason, but it's not the main reason. So in order to introduce the main reason, I'm going to first of all talk about a different question that people also get wrong. Here's the question: in what ways can somebody become sick? All right? In what ways can somebody be sick? If you ask that question to almost anybody, whether it's a non-biologist, whether it's a scientist, whether it's a doctor, you will almost always get an answer that looks more or less like this table I'm showing you here. People will say, well, there are infectious diseases. That's column 1, of course, and we've talked about that already. Then there's congenital diseases, things that people inherit from their parents. Those things are, of course, rare, and, they're important, but they're very rare. And then there's the big one, the chronic, progressive conditions of late life, like Alzheimer's disease and almost all cancers. Not quite all, but almost all. And, all the things that I put up on the previous slide in unintelligibly small print. And then almost everybody will tell you that way out in the stratosphere, there is this separate, completely unrelated category called aging itself, which is it consists of these rather poorly defined things like frailty. But the very deep-seated conviction is that things in column 4 are so different from diseases that you shouldn't really even think about medical interventions, that it's off limits to medicine, like it's woven into the fabric of the universe. And so the first thing I'm going to do is to explain to you why that isn't true. Here we go. So here's my definition of aging. Now, first of all, think about that for a moment. Why on earth would I have to give a definition of aging in 2026? I mean, aging has been the number one preoccupation of the human race since the dawn of civilization. And yet, here we are. If you ask 10 people what their definition of aging is, they will all give different answers. I mean, it's insane. So why is that such a problem? Well, of course it's a problem. You can't have a conversation when two people are using the same term in different ways. So the thing is, there are a lot of definitions of aging out there that are correct. But what's important for a definition is not only that it should be correct, but that it should be useful, that it should allow you to talk and think and discuss the topic in a manner that's productive. So here's my definition, which I believe is the best definition out there for that purpose. I say that aging is the combination of two processes. One process that happens throughout life, even starting before we're born, and one process that kicks off late in life. So the left-hand process consists of metabolism generating damage. Metabolism, as I'm sure you all know, is the word that biologists use to denote the entire network of processes that the body performs all the time in order to keep us alive from one day to the next. And the thing is, metabolism generates damage. It generates changes to the molecular and cellular structure of the body, changes that accumulate over time. And the reason I'm using the word damage to denote those changes is that the body is built to tolerate only a certain amount of those changes. For a certain amount, there's no problem. Now, that's why 40-year-olds are functioning almost exactly as well as 20-year-olds. But the fact is, damage is accumulating, and eventually there's more than what the body is set up to tolerate. And that's where the right-hand process kicks in, of course. Then eventually the damage exceeds what the body knows what to do with and how to control, and function starts to go downhill. Physical function and mental function starts to decline, and that's what I'm using the word pathology to denote. So that's my definition of aging. Very simple, 3 words. All right, so why did I do that? Well, Basically, I gave you that definition because I want to give a correct version of the table that I outlined a moment ago. If you look closely here, you will see that all of the columns in this table are exactly the same as what they were in the previous version. The only thing that I have changed is that I have shifted that big thick black line. It's no longer between column 3 and column 4, it's now between column 2 and column 3. And by doing that, I am trying to express two really important points. The first one I want to express is that we now have our answer to the question that I began the talk with. It should be no surprise at all that the type of medicine which works so well against column 1 is ineffective against column 3. They are completely different things. Column 1 is stuff that you may or may not be suffering from as a result of some external agent, some infectious agent. And column 3 is a side effect of being alive. Hello, it's the accumulation of too much damage. That's all that it is. So that means that the other thing that we are showing you, that I'm expressing by moving that black line, is that there is essentially no difference, no meaningful difference between column 3 and column 4. Really, there is only, I am not exaggerating here. Literally, there is only a semantic difference. That the things in column 3 are the aspects of aging that we have chosen to give disease-like names to. That's really all it is. That's really all it is. And that's really important because it means that one can no longer get away with thinking that column 4 is somehow off limits to medicine. Because nobody's going to say that column 3 is off limits to medicine, right? So this is pretty good news. All right, so now let's get on to the question of what we're going to do about aging. Well, first of all, what do I mean by doing something about aging? What I mean, of course, is we want to separate, partially or completely, we want to separate metabolism from pathology. We want to allow the body to continue performing metabolism. In other words, we want people to carry on being alive without getting sick. That's what we want to do. It's the goal. So how might we do that? Well, the right way to start answering that question is to look very simply at the options, starting from our definition of aging. So one way, in theory, to separate metabolism from pathology would be to separate damage from pathology. And that's what I'm showing you here, the geriatrics approach. Now, does that really make sense? Well, no, it makes no sense at all. It's like what you're doing here is you're completely ignoring the idea that damage accumulates, the fact that damage accumulates. If you look at this picture for like 5 seconds without any expertise, it's immediately obvious that anything that tries to separate damage from pathology without doing anything about the damage itself is going to become progressively less effective as time goes on and more damage accumulates. It's just obvious. But think about it. This is what we do today. This is what we've been doing ever since people started to care about the health problems of late life. We try to attack those pathologies of late life as if they were infections. So that now will explain to you why I spent so much time on that little table, why I need to give you the incorrect version and the correct version. This is the answer to the question, why the problems of aging are not being solved by medicine today. We are simply attacking it in completely the wrong way. All right, so, well, am I telling you anything new? Well, it may be new to you, but it's not new. A few people started thinking the kind of things that I've said so far, more than a century ago. And that's where the whole field of gerontology came from. People started thinking, well, we can't separate metabolism from pathology by separating damage from pathology. It's just not going to work. So instead, let's try to be more preventative. Let us try to separate metabolism from pathology by separating metabolism from damage. Why not? And a particularly strong inspiration for that was the living world, the observation that in nature we see a huge, huge variety of, variation of rates of aging. We see some really short-lived species and some really long-lived species. And so people thought, well, maybe we can study that. Maybe we can figure out why long-lived species are so long-lived and are able to create damage so slowly. And maybe by understanding that, we can figure out how to make humans create damage even more slowly than we naturally do. We can figure out medicines that weaken or break the link between metabolism and damage. Great idea, in principle. But, what do you know, it hasn't worked. And this is why it hasn't worked. Metabolism is viciously, viciously complicated. I don't know if there's any of you here who have ever written software, but if there are, then you will immediately see that this is the ultimate nightmare of uncommented spaghetti code. There's just no way that we are going to be able to disentangle this and stop metabolism from doing the thing that we don't want it to do, the creation of damage, without having unintended consequences that stop it from doing things we need it to do to keep us alive. And of course, I am massively understating the problem here, because this is a simplified diagram of a small subset of what we know about how metabolism works. So if I tried to show you the whole of what we know about how metabolism works, it would look like that slide that I had earlier with all the lists of health problems. It would be worse than that. And in fact, of course, the biggest part of all, the biggest oversimplification of all, is that we need to take into account the stuff that we don't know. Which every biologist is perfectly well aware that the amount we don't know about how metabolism works far exceeds the amount that we do know. So it's just a non-starter. Even with AI, we're not going to, the things that, the creation of damage is just too inextricably intertwined with the things that we need metabolism to do to keep us going. Which all sounds pretty miserable, doesn't it? And indeed, it did sound pretty miserable to the people who were working on the biology of aging through, I'm going to say, the second half of the 20th century. Because by certainly about 1960, what I've told you so far about the impracticality of either the geriatrics approach or the gerontology approach had become very obvious. You couldn't ignore it anymore. And so people basically just gave up. They said, sometimes I compare gerontologists of that period to seismologists, people who study earthquakes. Because people who study earthquakes, they know that earthquakes are bad for you, right? But they have no aspiration, no intention to ever stop earthquakes from happening. They just try and help us to get out of the way. It's like, it shouldn't be that way. We should be aiming high and trying to actually fix the problem. And so 25 years ago, I came along and put forward an idea that apparently had completely escaped everybody. Apparently because people were using bad definitions of aging, definitions that were not as good as this one. I said, well, wait. We want to separate metabolism from pathology. We've got these two ways that won't work, but there's this third way we can use. Rather than trying to attack and attenuate either of the two component processes that make up aging, instead, we can separate the processes from each other. What we can do is preventative maintenance. We can just go in every so often and repair most, not necessarily all, of the damage that metabolism has already laid down, and thereby reduce the total amount of damage so that it's not getting close to making us sick. And if we do that, then we have huge, huge advantages, because we don't need to understand these processes. I've emphasized very hard over the past half hour that the process of creation of damage and the process of creation of pathology are both ridiculously complicated. But if we're not interfering with those processes, we don't need to understand them. We can just repair the damage. So all we need to do is characterize what the damage is. In other words, what differences there are in structure and composition of the body in, let's say, middle age relative to how it was in early adulthood, and just find ways to restore that structure and composition to something like how it was at a younger age. In theory, in the abstract, that sounds really straightforward. But the main thing I want to emphasize is that even though in practice it's not straightforward at all, it's a hell of a lot more practical than either of the other approaches. So that is the kind of paradigm shift that I initiated 25 years ago, and that has been more or less accepted by most people in the field now, and that all of us, well, lots and lots of us are working on. Here's, of course, an analogy. The fact is, the right way to think about aging is that it is not a phenomenon of biology at all. It's a phenomenon of physics. Any machine that has moving parts is inevitably going to damage itself as a consequence of its normal operation. A machine that had moving parts and did not damage itself would be a perpetual motion machine, and you know that those things are not possible. So, damage happens. And yet, here's a car that is 100 years old, and it's working every bit as well as the day it was built. Why is that? It's not because it was designed to last 100 years. It was probably designed to last 10 years. Nearly every car that was built in the same year that this car was built went on the scrap heap decades and decades ago. But this car did not, and the reason it did not is simply because it has benefited from an unusually thorough amount of preventative maintenance. So, I told you that it's not straightforward in practice, and I will start by telling you what I mean by that in an introductory way. The body is, of course, a ridiculously complicated machine, vastly more complicated than a car, which means that it does many, many, many more types of damage to itself than what a car does in the course of its normal operation. But it turns out that if you look closely, you can see that there are groups of types of damage, categories I'm calling them. And the harder I looked at this, the more I realized that actually there are really only a very manageable number of categories. I ended up with just these 7 categories that you can see on the left-hand side of this table. And, you know, I was pretty confident back then, in the year 2000-ish, that this was an exhaustive classification, that we were not going to have to expand it later on. The reason I was confident was because all of these categories had been identified and studied quite a lot for at least 18 years by the point that I was working on this. And now it's more than twice that, and we still haven't had to extend the list. This classification is standing the test of time, and that's a really, really important thing for you to take away from this talk. We seem to know what the problem is, what the challenge is. So that's a great start. But then we have to ask, you know, what's so good about this classification? What's so useful about it? The answer is that for each category, we can describe a generic approach to actually doing this preventative maintenance, this damage repair. So in the interest of time, I will only talk about the top category, cell loss. What is that? Cell loss is when cells die and they are not automatically replaced by the division of other cells. Okay, simple thing. Of course, most cells, when they die, they are replaced by the division of other cells, but some cells are not. For example, neurons, brain cells. And sure enough, it turns out that one of the most important aspects of aging, Parkinson's disease, is caused by exactly this, by the death of a certain type of neuron called a dopaminergic neuron, which is not replaced because there are no dopaminergic precursor cells, essentially stem cells, in the brain to do that. So what we do is, of course, we put those stem cells in. We identify stem cells that are of the right type, and we put them into the body, and we put them into the right part of the brain in particular, and they divide and they transform themselves into dopaminergic neurons, the cells that were dying and not being replaced. This was first tried more than 30 years ago, and it worked occasionally. It mostly didn't work, and we know why. It's simply because back then we didn't have any of the technology we have today to manipulate stem cells in the lab so that they're the right kind of stem cell before we inject them. But they occasionally got lucky, these researchers, 30-odd years ago in Sweden. And when they got lucky, when people responded, they responded spectacularly. No other treatment, just one stem cell treatment, no symptoms of Parkinsonism for more than a decade. That's about as close to a cure as you can imagine. And now, of course, we know far more about how to manipulate stem cells, so people are very optimistic about this approach, and there are literally half a dozen clinical trials going on around the world doing exactly this, and everyone's very optimistic. Same kind of thing is true at an earlier stage of development for all the other ones that I'm mentioning. I do want to emphasize earlier stage. It's going to be a while before we really get all of this together, but the good news is that everything here has moved forward far enough that the private sector is getting involved. Money is coming in from investors, not just from donors, not just from governments. People who actually want to make money back are coming in. And that tells you that there is confidence that the time frame for getting this to work is foreseeable, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. In academia, as I mentioned, this whole concept has been pretty much accepted. It did take a while, I'm going to tell you. I had several years there when I was fighting a real running battle with my colleagues, but in 2013 this paper came out, and it has become the absolute Bible of the field. It's called The Hallmarks of Aging, and it's basically a restatement of what I proposed more than a decade earlier. It's not a completely perfect restatement, and I could complain about it if I wanted to, but I'm not going to, because the fact is, it was an idea whose time had come by that point. And so now nobody has a problem with the idea that the right way to attack aging is by a kind of divide and conquer approach. All right. I think I'm going to stop there, because I could talk about the work that LEV Foundation itself is doing, but that's going to get pretty technical. I know there are plenty of people in the audience who are not particularly technically sophisticated, so I would prefer to stop and give a nice 15 minutes to questions. So thank you very much, and I will stop sharing my screen. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm here. Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. de Grey, for that wonderful lectures. And this actually captured what I had in mind and what our audience would have wanted to know, because the question of aging is really a big one for most of the people who just joined newly to understand what is happening in the longevity field, in the biology of aging. And a couple of lecturers or instructors from the start of this third cohort that have been given numerous definition, and I tend to arrange it in such a way that you benefit from each of the scholars. And there is one thing that I would want you to throw a little bit light then before we get into the conversation or the questioning proper. There are a lot of questions around biological age and the intervention, and your past definition as a medicated condition, aging as a medicated conditions, and most people listening to the definition as information lost and all that. So it gets to that kind of intellectual bottlenecks where people struggle. What are they really saying? But your breakdown answered and addressed that question. But I would want you to talk about it a little bit as a medicated condition, and then we get to the question that a lot of people would want to ask. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I like to call aging. I call it a medical condition. I prefer not to call it a disease, and I also prefer to not to call it not a disease, because if you call it a disease, then people think it's in my column one. You know, they think it's like an infection, which it's not. And if you call it not a disease, then people think it's like not amenable to medical intervention, even in principle. So, you know, the problem of calling aging either a disease or not a disease is, you know, encapsulated in that tape, that in the incorrect version, the first version of the table that I put up. So calling it a medical condition kind of avoids that. But yeah, I mean, calling it a medical condition doesn't say anything about the mechanism of aging. It just says we have the potential to do something about it with medicine. So when people talk about particular mechanisms of aging, whether it's, you know, telomere shortening, or whether it's free radical damage, or whether it's information loss, these are aspects of the accumulation of damage, aspects of the mechanism whereby metabolism generates damage. And so really the thing that I mean trying to emphasize here is that we probably won't get very far if we focus on trying to understand more and more and more and more about those mechanisms. And we don't need to, because we can go one step further on in the chain of events. We can look at the damage itself that is generated by those mechanisms, and we can repair that damage. If we're doing that, then we do not need to slow down the rate at which the damage is created. And if we don't need to slow that down, then we don't need to understand anything about it. We can just let metabolism do its thing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. de Grey. Now we get into the question. Please, if you have any question that you would want to ask, feel free, just raise your hand. Then we get into the question proper. You have any confusion with regards to the biology of aging, longevity, from the lecture today, feel free to raise your hand and ask your question.
This is normal. People are shy. Here we go. There's one.
Yeah. Onyechupu, please go ahead and ask your question.
And there you go.
Hey everyone, good evening, Chelsea. Good evening, Dr. Aubrey. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I have two questions. I don't know if you addressed it during the course of your lectures, but I still have to ask so that you clear me. So I understand that aging involves the progressive loss of malfunctional cells, right? So I don't know if I am wrong in my understanding. So my question is,
let me stop you there for a moment. So aging is loss of function of the body as a whole, physical function and mental function. Now, the body is constructed of not only cells, but also stuff between cells, the extracellular matrix, you know, things like that. And we have to worry about the aging of those parts as well as the aging of cells. Furthermore, when we look at cells, we have to worry about cells simply dying and not being replaced, as I mentioned in the context of Parkinson's disease. We also have to worry about cells dividing when they're not supposed to, which is what cancer is. And we also have to worry about what goes on inside cells, like the accumulation of waste products. So this is the classification that I briefly mentioned during the talk. But the reason why I wanted to interrupt you was because I want to emphasize it's not only about cells.
okay, thank you. So I want to ask, if we successfully replace these cells that aging destroys, what happens to all the other forms of molecular damage that have accumulated around these cells? And would the replacement like actually reverse aging? or would it only repair one layer of the problem?
You're totally right. It would repair only one layer. This whole approach of damage repair is a divide and conquer approach. If we just fix one aspect of aging, then we will still need to fix the others, or we will not live all that much longer. Now, we may live a little bit longer, because it's important to recognize that all of these types of damage communicate with each other, very much in the same way that all parts of the body communicate with each other. So if you repair one type of damage, you are, in a way, relieving the pressure on the body in its efforts to minimize the rate of accumulation of other types of damage. And this is not just theoretical. We see this, especially in the laboratory. It's very clear that, for example, if you just get rid of these things called senescent cells, that's one of my 7 categories, which now we can do pretty well, then everything else improves. It doesn't improve completely, but it improves a bit. So the mice actually live longer, even though there are lots of other types of damage that we are not directly repairing.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I have another question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I get to understand that our body repair, or as in replace damaged cells. Now, why does our body get weaker, like along the line, and it does not repair or replace damaged cells again? Is it that we are meant to stop living at a point in our lives?
Great question. So people have misunderstood this a lot over the years. When the whole idea of evolution was first introduced by Charles Darwin 150 years ago, people immediately started thinking, well, you know, evolution exists, evolution is very clever, evolution wants genetic information to survive. Why do we have aging? And the first thought was, we have aging because somehow it's better for the species. Obviously, it's bad for the individual, but maybe if we somehow eliminate old individuals, then evolution will work better. And this was universally accepted for more than half a century. But then in the middle of the 20th century, people started to realize that it was nonsense. Because there are just not enough deaths from aging in the wild. In general, if you're living in the wild, you know, your main problems for staying alive are predation, being eaten by a tiger, or, hypothermia or starvation, not aging. And people started to realize that no, actually, evolution does want us to live indefinitely. So then the question comes up, okay, why has evolution failed to achieve what it wants? And the very simple answer is it doesn't want it badly enough. There's a fundamental concept in evolutionary biology called mutation selection balance. Look it up, anyone who hasn't heard of it. What it says basically is that we constantly have mutations happening in our germ cells, in our sperm and our eggs, and most of those mutations are deleterious. They make our bodies function less well. The reason that we as a species, or any species, is still here is because those mutations are selected against. Individuals that carry the mutations do not have as many offspring as individuals that don't carry the mutations. But still, there's a balance. If you want to live longer as a species, you have to have mutations that make you live longer, and those mutations have to survive in the context of this constant mutation process that's happening. And unless there is a big survival advantage, not just a tiny one, a big one, those mutations will not survive. They will just be negated by other mutations, and the species will not live longer. That's called mutation selection balance, and as applies to lifespan. And that's why we only live as long as we do. It's because evolution doesn't want, it wants us to live longer, but it doesn't want that badly enough to have actually done it. So we have to do it with medicine instead. We have to augment what evolution has done.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So I have about a couple more minutes, if anyone has any more questions.
More question, please.
I have to say those two questions were really excellent ones. That's the kind of question we want. So I hope my answers were helpful to everybody, not just to the person who asked the question.
Okay.
All right, guys.
I have one question.
Go ahead, Effie.
Just one question. The question is just to try to fix or to empower those in the room and the movement in Africa. So we've always been faced with this question that aging, that we always in Afrolongevity, we always talk about biological age or aging fighting, aging stopping, aging as if it is the single most important problem in Africa amidst everything that Africa is facing in recent age and time. And when faced with the question as such, what do you think we should respond when people want us to focus on infectious diseases?
So let me give a two-part answer to that question. The first part of the answer is the same as I would say to anyone outside Africa. I always say aging is a really big problem that will require a lot of different skill sets to solve it. Not just to solve it scientifically, but to make sure that the solutions are distributed, all those kinds of things. So everybody is in a different position in terms of what they can contribute. If you're a scientist, go into the right kind of science. If you're a wealthy individual, make sure that you put your money into the right organizations. If you are a journalist, have experts like me on your podcast or whatever, and make sure that you can educate your audience. Of course, that's one part of what you and Brenda are doing with this education program. So there's different things for different people. That's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is more Africa specific. I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that there are various things that Africa can offer to the world that are relevant to aging that nobody else can offer. You've got more genetic diversity, you've got more cultural diversity, and now is the time when the science, the research community worldwide can finally start to take real advantage of those things. It was very hard to do until we had better ways to handle large amounts of data, heterogeneous data, but now we're really in a position where we can do that. So everyone here should be thinking about how you can fit into that network. You can get obviously guidance from Ursi and Brenda and connections with other people who are involved. People who have worked both in the West and in Africa are very helpful because they will understand the difficulties, the ways to make sure that what you can do is actually, is actually effective, actually gets through to the global research community. So yes, there are lots of things, but everybody is in a different position. So, just, do your homework, figure out how you can make the most difference.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. de Grey, if you were advising the African Union today, and they gave you a modest but serious budget to establish the foundations of an African rejuvenation research ecosystem, where would you put the first dollar, and what would you deliberate not spend it on?
Well, well, first of all, I would give plenty of money to the efforts that Afrolongevity is already pursuing. Education really comes first. You need a critical mass of people who understand the nature of the problem, both in Africa and worldwide, well enough to be able to make a contribution. So education is absolutely critical, and a lot of money needs to be spent on that right now in Africa. Beyond that, of course, it's very important to actually do research. A lot of early stage research, especially early stage human research, is descriptive, observational. You collect a lot of samples, you analyze them, you find things out. You don't necessarily come up with hypotheses and interventions at once, you're just gathering data. So at the moment, around the rest of the world, we have these huge biobanks where large numbers of people have been sampled, sometimes in a longitudinal manner over many decades. People have been part of the same study for maybe 40 years. And this is enormously valuable. But if you look at the details of these biobanks, you will find that the ethnic diversity is pathetic. I mean, it's insanely bad. So, biobanks of the same kind that exist in the West, but which are focused on African diversity, would be, there's no words to describe how valuable that would be. So that is certainly one huge place where I would put a lot of money.
Okay, so Chika, please, can you ask your question?
Yeah, please be quick, because I've got to go in a couple of minutes.
All right. Good evening, Doctor.
Hi.
Good evening. Listening to Doctor's explanation to the last question, I'm wondering, Doc, sir, what will be your advice if I ask what's the best approach to aging?
Well, I think I have probably emphasized that there's no one answer to that question. You have, if you want to ask me a specific question about yourself, then you would have to tell me more about yourself, about what you're good at, what your opportunities are. And the best way to do that would be by email. You can get my email from OC or Brenda, and I promise I will answer. But
right,
it will take longer than we have right now.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Please, quickly. Peace. Chinenye.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, good evening, Doc.
Hello.
Hello, I'm here. I hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. Thank you, OC. Please, I just want to make a request. It's very interesting so far. Thank you very much. My request is on Doctor's slides. There's a particular diagram he brought out about metabolism, and so now, please, I don't know, I would like to have that particular diagram.
Sure. Write me an email and I will send you my whole PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you.
It's all right. Peace, are you ready to ask your question? Because Dr. de Grey is almost late.
I am late.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. de Grey. Any other question, I'll get them and send it through your emails.
Yeah.
And then take it off from there. Brenda,
My pleasure.
Final comments, please.
I don't think so. Anyway, just want to say thank you so much to Ursi and Brenda for arranging this. Thank you to everyone here for attending. I hope I have been able to explain things to you a bit, and I really encourage you to get involved in this field. It is the field that's most important in the whole world right now, and the more people can get involved, especially in other parts of the world, the better. So you can make a big difference to the world by getting involved in this. Please do. Bye for
Thank
now.
you so much, Aubrey. We really appreciate it. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. All right then. Bye for now. Till next time.
Okay. Wow. Swift. So
That was amazing.
that was amazing. You know.
That was amazing, honestly, even though network was shitty from my side, but I really
So
enjoyed it.
for those who couldn't make the live section, we have the recorded version already shared on the group. So this is why we need to be in time. I always stress on this. There are some instructors that you can't afford to miss their class. It's very difficult to get hold of Aubrey. And if we get hold of him, you have to be there, you know. So I try as much as possible to make sure that we have the right resource persons. We have the best in the field talk to us. So it is not it's not just a child's play. So we look at the best chief science officers around and then get them for this program. Tomorrow we're going to have an interesting section, and then going forward, Aubrey's class, we have a lot of questions coming from there for exams. So take notes. Brenda, please wrap up so that
if I may as well, I think I just want to thank everybody. And I mean, I was just listening to the questions. These are brilliant questions. And I'm sure that there was I saw there was reluctance to ask the question as well, because he says so much that you want to process. But I would like to encourage each and every one of us, especially when we get sought after scientists like this, to really put your questions ahead. There's no right or wrong answer or wrong question. Let's just ask the questions and then get the best out of these speakers as we can. But quite impressed by the attendance, and let's keep coming through and learning from all of these people that the team has ensured that we can get at such notice. Thank you so much once again.
Please.
Okay. Will I say good? We just have to call it there for today. And someone wanted to ask a question.
Sorry.
Go ahead, then I will. Dr. Nancy, go ahead. Then after Dr. Nancy, Chinaya, you ask a question.
I thought you said the lecture was 7 p.m.
Yeah.
But I came a little before 7 and we are closing.
Oh, sorry, 7 p.m. 7 p.m. what? 7 p.m. what? 8 p.m. SATs, and then 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Oh, it's not GMT.
Oh no, sorry, my bad. I could have specified. Sorry.
So I'm confused.
Don't worry, I will talk to you aside, and I'll send you more information. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, based on what you said, you mentioned about the exam. Are we going to take exam at the end of the classes?
Yes, we communicated that strongly.
Oh, I didn't get that from.
Oh, even the orientation, the day for orientation, I communicated that strongly. There will be examination. Check the timetable too. You will see there'll be examination and there'll be certification.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Which
And
means
there'll be certification because
we need strong notes to prepare.
Yeah, I'll be sending some materials. That's why I sent most of the slides and more information. There'll be more information and for people to really understand what's happening. For those who missed the classes, yeah, there will be
Please remember to share that of yesterday.
The one of yesterday, did I not share?
No, I think it was the day before yesterday that you shared.
Okay, I will discuss with Aaron after this call to get them. Any other question? Aisha, please.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Brenda and Mr. Akuma. Before we leave, could you please give more details on the conference that was mentioned yesterday?
Okay, I said I would share that in the group, right? Someone asked the question. I said I'm going to share that.
Yes, that was me actually. I was hoping you wouldn't forget.
No, I won't. Thank you.
Okay.
Just want to manage time. Okay. Any other question? No. Thank you so much, guys, for making our time to be here. Good night. Good morning.